All right, so here we are at the Helping Relationship Part 5. We are starting with behavior theory. Behaviorist, we have Ivan Pavlov. Cre- He is credited for classical conditioning. His famous experiment using dogs. The bill was the conditioned stimulus, abbreviated CS, and the meat was the unconditioned stimulus that can be abbreviated US, so unconditioned stimulus, US or UCS. So he had a famous experiment using dogs. The bell, the sound of the bell was the conditioned stimulus, which is what they had to learn, and the meat was the unconditioned stimulus, the unlearned stimulus. So behavior is big on learning, and the types of learning is through reinforcement, which would be operant conditioning, association, which is classical conditioning, or insight, which is like the aha moment when things begin to connect or make sense. So again, the types of learning is reinforcement, that's Skinner's operant conditioning, association, which is Pavlov's classical conditioning, and then insight. Classical conditioning is credited to Ivan Pavlov. It can also be referred to as association learning. The unconditioned response is UR. So, an unconditioned or unlearned response, think of a reflex, also known as respondent behavior. So, unconditioned is unlearned response, such as a reflex, which is a respondent behavior. A unconditioned response is stronger than a conditioned response because it's natural. It's just what you would do or how, without even thinking about it. So that's why it's stronger. A conditioned, so those are unconditioned response, UR. So now we're going to talk about stimuli or stimulus. A conditioned stimuli, CS, is a learned stimuli or stimulus. An unconditioned stimuli, UCS or US, is unlearned. So conditioned equals learned, unconditioned equals unlearned. CS or conditioned stimuli is also can also be referred to as an NS, neutral stimuli. So conditional stimuli, CS, is the same thing as a neutral stimuli, NS. USC or US, which is, oh, sorry, I put USC, but I meant UCS, or US equals reinforcing and charged stimulus. So the unconditioned stimuli is unlearned. So it equals reinforcing and charged stimulus. So the acquisition period is the time it takes to learn or acquire a given behavior. So acquisition period is the time it takes to acquire or learn a given behavior. The most effective time interval which is also referred to as temporal relation. So, temporal relation is the most effective time interval, the most important or effective time interval. That's temporal relation. So, the most effective time interval between the CS conditioned stimuli and the US unconditioned stimuli is zero point 0.5 or half a second. As the interval exceeds half a second, more trials are needed for effective conditioning. So, the most effective time interval is between the conditioned stimuli and the unconditioned stimuli is a half a second. Once it goes beyond a half a second, more trials are needed. And we refer to the most effective time interval being the temporal relation. Conditioned stimuli, and remember using Pavlov's example, was the bell, should come before the unconditioned stimuli slash reinforcer. That's the meat. And it lasts until the unconditioned stimuli, the meat, occur, and lasts until US occurs in order to trigger the unconditional response, salivating. So the conditioned stimuli, the bell, should come before the unconditioned stimuli. So you would want to sound the bell before you bring the meat. But you should be sounding the bell while the meat lasts or while the US occurs. So that hearing the bell, seeing the meat at the same time, right after is what's going to trigger the unconditioned response, which is salivating. When the conditioned stimulus, which is the bell, precedes the unconditioned stimuli or reinforcer, the meat, by a significant time period, making the organism, the dog, learn to withhold the conditioned response, which is salivating. This is a delayed conditioning. So this says we ring the bell, and then a long period of time occurs, and then the meat comes. Just like when you're at a restaurant, you order your food, they take the order, you wait a long time, then your food comes. And so during that time, you're withholding the conditioned stimulus of being happy with your food. This is delay conditioning. If the conditioned stimulus, the bell, terminates before the occurrence of the unconditioned stimuli, the meat, this is trace conditioning. So that means we ring the bell stops, and then the meat comes. That is trace conditioning. Putting the unconditioned stimuli, the meat, before the conditioned stimuli, the bell, results in no conditioning, also called backward conditioning, which is ineffective. Because if you bring the meat, the dog is going to salivate. So it's not going to connect the meat to the bell because it's meat salivate. The unconditioned stimuli reinforcer, the response. So that was backward conditioning, which is ineffective. If both stimuli are presented at the exact same time, this is called simultaneous conditioning and is ineffective. Conditioning will not occur. So conditioning does not occur when you put the meat, the reinforcer, before the conditioned stimuli, the bell, because in a sense you're doing it backward conditioning, and it's not going to be effective. If you bring them out at the same time, that is also ineffective because the dog's mind is going to zoom in on the meat, the reinforcer, without paying attention to the bell. They need to hear the sound of the bell first, then see the meat, because that's how they connect. Oh, bell means meat. Unconditionally, they're going to respond with the slava. So that was simultaneous conditioning, which is ineffective, and conditioning will not occur when both are brought out at the exact same time. So we have stimulus generalization. That is also referred to as irradiation or second order conditioning. So stimulus generalization or second order conditioning is when a stimulus that is similar to a conditioned stimulus produces the same reaction. So, say if a dog is trained to react or respond, unconditioned response, salivate to a, a toy horn, and so that's what they have been conditioned for. But they hear a car horn that sounds similar, and that car horn causes them to salivate. That would be a stimulus generalization or second order condition, because now the is just basically saying that the dog was kind of is similar enough to be generalized. A stimulus generalization or second order conditioning is weaker than the response produced by the original conditioning. Stimulus discrimination or differentiation is the learning is when the learning process is fine-tuned to only respond to the specific stimulus. So if you have the situation where there's stimulus generalization going on, the dog responds to the toy as well as the car horn. um, you would want to begin the differentiation process or stimulus discrimination, meaning you're fine tuning it to only respond to that specific stimulus, the toy. Experimental neurosis is when the differentiation process becomes too tough because the stimuli are almost identical and causes an emotional disturbance. So, experimental neurosis, that process of trying to differentiate becomes too tough because the stimuli are very, very similar, um, or identical, and causes emotional disturbance. So, extinction, the conditioned stimuli, using the same example, Pavlov's example, the bell, is not reinforced by the unconditioned stimuli, the meat, no longer triggering the conditioned response. The conditioned response, hmm, hmm, yeah, I think that's supposed to be conditions. Yeah, that had to be wrong because it says the conditioned stimuli, the bell, is not reinforced by the unconditioned stimuli, the meat, or the, and remember the unconditioned stimuli is the reinforcer. The unconditioned response of salivating is not eliminated but is suppressed or inhibited. So the extinction is when the conditional response is not reinforced by the US, the meat no longer triggering the unconditioned response salivating. The unconditioned response salivating is not eliminated but is suppressed or inhibited. So when you think of extinction, don't think of like fully terminated or away. Just think um, suppressed or inhibited, not as strong. Like extinction, as in the process of being extinct, but not completely extinct. So, example, during a family counseling session, a 6-year-old repeatedly sticks her tongue out at the counselor, who is obviously ignoring the behavior. The counselor is practicing extinction, meaning the conditioned stimuli, sticking the tongue out, is not reinforced by the unconditioned stimuli, the counselor. So it doesn't trigger the unconditioned response of like, the counselor addressing the issue. So they are not reinforcing it so that way that the child can suppress it. When using extinction, the behavior will get worse before it gets eliminated, also called a response burst or an extinction burst. So, when using extinction, the behavior will get worse before it gets eliminated, also called a response burst or extinction burst. Ignoring behavior, extinction would be ignoring behavior and a timeout, um, which are both common methods of extinction. So, extinction is purposely not providing the conditioned response, like think of a parent not providing the conditioned response of yelling when the child, hold on, this why okay, so think of it like if a child is doing something bad, like digging in the dirt, and you told them not to dig in the dirt. So the conditioned stimuli or the learned behavior is them digging in the dirt. I'm not going to reinforce using my unconditioned stimuli, which will no longer trigger the response. So kids look to get a response out of you. You're not giving them that response. You're either going to ignore the behavior or give them a timeout, which are methods of extinction. Okay. Aversive conditioning is when an unwanted behavior is targeted by pairing it with a negative stimulus in an attempt to reduce the unwanted behavior. So, aversive conditioning is when an unwanted behavior is targeted by pairing it with a negative stimulus in an attempt to reduce the unwanted behavior. So, the example for this would be therapy for someone who wants to stop smoking. They receive an electrical shock every time they view an image of a cigarette. Antabuse is given to an alcoholic, which is a drug that causes nausea. So if you see antabuse, that's going to be aversive conditioning. So you want an unwanted behavior is targeted. The unwanted behavior is the addiction to smoking by pairing it with a negative stimulus. The antabuse, which, oh, sorry, for the smoking situation is pairing it with an electrical shock, which is a negative stimulus, and that is in an attempt to reduce the unwanted behavior, the smoking. In an alcoholic, the unwanted behavior is the drinking. You're going to pair that with antabuse, anabuse, which is going to cause nausea, a negative stimulus, in an attempt to reduce the unwanted behavior. That is aversive conditioning. You kind of want to avert them away. So the steps, um, hmm. So baseline is the frequency of the behavior untreated. It is charted using an A. So remember when we saw ABA, the first A was the behavior untreated. Behavior modification strategies are based heavily on Skinnerian, which is operant or instrumental, while behavior therapy emphasizes Pavlov's classical slash respondent therapy. So behavior modification, changing the behavior through reinforcers, are based heavily on Skinnerian, which is the operant or instrumental behavior modification. That's that reinforcement. And while behavior therapy conditioning or association emphasizes Pavlov's classical respondent. So under Pavlov's classical respondent is higher order conditioning, which is when a new stimulus is associated or paired with the conditioned stimulus, and the new stimulus takes on the power of the conditioned stimulus. So you introduce a new stimulus, which is associated or paired with a pre existing conditioned stimulus. However, that new one takes the power of the old one and essentially takes over. So, example, after a dog is conditioned using the well known experiment of Pavlov, we know that's to be hearing the bell, seeing meat, beginning to salivate. Say if in a higher order conditioning, a light is paired with the bell. So the new stimulus would be the light, and the conditioned stimulus remains the bell. In a short period of time, the light alone would elicit the salvation because it takes over. The light is a NS or neutral stimulus. Then we have B.F. Skinner, who is the operant conditioning, aka instrumental learning, meaning the same thing. This is based off reinforcement theory. It Reinforcement theory was elaborated from Edward Thorndike's law of effect. And the law of effect states that behaviors with good consequences, satisfaction, will be repeated, while behaviors with bad consequences are less likely to be repeated. That was Edward Thorndike's law of effect, which is where Skinner elaborated his reinforcement theory or operant conditioning, also known as instrumental learning. All right. So, operant conditioning All reinforce all reinforcers, positive or negative, tend to increase the probability that a behavior will occur. Positive reinforcers is when something was is added following the operant, which means the behavior. Operant is another word for behavior. So positive reinforcers is when something is added following the operant or the behavior. It is possible to use positive reinforcers to reduce or eliminate an undesirable target behavior through differential reinforcement of other behavior, which is also called abbreviated as DRO. The counselor positively reinforces an individual for engaging in a healthy alternative behavior. The assumption is that as the alternative desirable behavior increases via reinforcement, the client will not display the inappropriate behavior as frequently. So, with positive reinforcers, is when something is added, but and reinforcers increase the probability that a behavior will occur. However, just know that positive reinforcements can reduce or eliminate undesirable behavior through differential reinforcement of other behavior. So that's like going to the gym. When someone gives you compliments, they add something to you. They give you the compliments or motivation when you go to the gym. A positive, they give you positive reinforcers. They add something to you, or they say, if you go to the gym, I will buy you new shoes. They're going to add something to you following the behavior. So, an example also is giving a treat to a dog who sits. So, the more that dog sits, you add something to them. You are adding the treat to that behavior of sitting. So, the the differential reinforcement of other behavior, what I think about is like someone who chooses to run instead of instead of like masturbate. So like say if the person is like, I'm choosing a to engage in a healthy alternative behavior of running instead of masturbating, and the counselor positively reinforces the running, that would be differential reinforcement of other behavior, meaning that positive reinforcer is reducing or eliminating the behavior of masturbating because you have through the alternative. Yeah, I feel like I made that more complicated than it had to be, but I think on the test I'll be fine. So, negative reinforcers equals something is taken away after the behavior occurs. So, after, that's the key word is positive reinforcers is adding something after the behavior. Negative reinforcers is taking something away after the behavior. So, taking a good example to remember is taking a pain reliever to get rid of pain. So, the pain is taken away after the behavior occurs. I take the pill, which is the behavior, and then the pain goes away. That's negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcers are not used as often as positive reinforcers and is not the same as punishment. Negative reinforcement provides release and increases chance of behavior happening. So if I take a pain reliever and it relieves me, it gets rid of my pain, there's a chance that I would do it more often. If I stretch after working out and that relieves my pain, then I'm more likely to do it again. So, punishment, on the other hand, aims to lower the chance that the behavior occurs, such as getting punished as a child. So, a negative reinforcement means that something is going to be taken away, but what's taken away is beneficial to me. Wow. We want to encourage that behavior. Punishment aims to lower the probability of something happening. I don't want you to do that anymore, so you're going to be punished. Punishment only temporarily suppresses the behavior. The child does not unlearn the negative or undesirable behavior. Positive punishment, when something is added after a behavior, decreases. Negative punishment is when something is removed following the behavior, further decreasing the behavior. So reinforcers is increase the behavior, punishment is decrease the behavior. Punishment can be positive or negative. That means positive, something good is added, like you wash the dishes, you get, oh no, because washing the dishes would be like a reinforcer. Oh, so like a positive. Okay, so a positive punishment is when something is added after the behavior decreases. So say if you are a kid and you go to school and you act up in class, like you do have fits, you just do the most, you get in trouble. We want to decrease that. So punishment could be used to decrease the behavior, the undesirable behavior. A positive punishment means you you go to school, you act oh yeah, so you go to school, you don't act up in every period, you only act up in one period, and then you get ice cream. So we are working to decrease the behavior, and we used a positive punishment. We use something was added to you to lower your chances of doing the behavior. A negative punishment is when something is removed following the further decrease of the behavior. So don't think of positive and negative in terms of good or bad. It's just plus or plus or minus. So punishment is when something is going to be when you're wanting to decrease the behavior, like bedwetting, and then something is removed following the once you decrease the action. So diapers are removed. Um, the further you go in decreasing the peeing and bedwetting, something is removed, like the diapers is removed, like that nasty little plastic over the bed is removed. That would be a negative punishment. So reinforcers means we want to increase the chances of the behavior happening. Punishment means we want to decrease the chances or probability of the behavior happening. Positive just means after it happens, something is added. Negative means after it happens, something is taken away. Phew. So that's that, the basics. So secondary reinforcers are Stimulus that reinforces a behavior after it has been associated with a primary reinforcer. So, secondary reinforcers are stimulus or stimuli that reinforce a behavior after it has been associated with a primary reinforcer. So, say you have a neutral stimulus such as money or grades or a plastic token, which becomes reinforcing by association. Thus, the plastic token is exchanged for known reinforcers. So, say the client is in a treatment center and they earn tokens for a targeted behavior. The tokens are then used or exchanged for known reinforcers, such as a trip to a Major League Baseball game. So, the primary reinforcer is the token that's the was added to right after the behavior, and the secondary or backup reinforces the baseball game. Is what's associated with that primary reinforcer. Another example is giving a dog a treat and telling him good boy. The primary reinforcer is the treat. The secondary reinforcer is the verbal praise. A stimulus which accompanies a primary reinforcer takes on reinforcement properties of its own. So, you know, that just like with the situation with the light being conditioned, being associated with the bill, it took over the bills. Like the bill wasn't needed um, anymore because it takes over the property. So you can, um, the good boy, like in a dog, the good boy, you know, would take over and be enough. It doesn't have to be associated with a treat all the time. So a stimulus which accompanies a primary reinforcer takes on reinforcement properties of its own. So then we have token reinforcement, which is generalized reinforcers. When a token, something that represents a reinforcer, is given after a desirable behavior. So that can be like coins, money, just anything that represents a reinforcer. Other terms we have is chain, chaining, a sequence, which is a sequence of behaviors where one response renders a cue that the next response is to occur. So in behavior modifications, simple behaviors are learned and then chained so that a complex behavior can take place. It is a series of operant or behaviors joined together by reinforcers. Continuous schedule of reinforcement is when a behavior is modifier will reinforce every behavior. I think that might say means to say continuous schedule of reinforcement is when a behavior modifier will reinforce every behavior. Then we have intermittent schedule of reinforcement. The target behavior is reinforced only after the behavior manifests itself several times or for a given time interval. So, continuous schedule of reinforcement. A behavior modifier will reinforce every behavior. And then we have intermittent schedule of reinforcement. The behavior target is reinforced only after the behavior manifests itself several times or for a given time interval. Most humans' behavior manifests through this reinforcing method. It can also be referred to as partial reinforcement or thinning. Two basic classes of intermittent reinforcement schedules. are ratio and interval. Successful approximations is operant behavior modification term, which suggests that a behavior is gradually accomplished by reinforcing successful steps until the target behavior is reached. This is also known as shaping or shaping using successful approximations. So, most likely on the test, what we're going to see is shaping. So, shaping is operant behavior modification term, which suggests that a behavior is gradually accomplished by reinforcing successful steps until the target behavior is reached. So, shaping is small steps and small reinforcement until the target is reached. Intermittent schedule is the target behavior is reinforced only after the behavior manifests itself several times. So you have to in intermittent, it happens. So think intermittent fasting. Say you fast Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then you receive the reinforcer because it has to happen several times. Versus successful approximation means you're going to do a little step, get reinforced, add a little more, get reinforced. So covert is hidden or behavior is not observable. Typically, the client's thought or as a visualization or like a dream. Overt is observable behavior, which means direct treatment of an overt observable behavior is called in vivo treatment performed outside the imagination. So it's performed outside, so it's observable. Desensitize is less sensitive, and sensitize is more sensitive. So if I want to sensitize you to something, I want to make you more sensitive versus desensitize is less sensitive. So here we are with the continuing the intermittent schedule of reinforcement, which is the two basic classes, ratio and interval. Ratio means it is based on the number of responses. Think ratio math, the number of responses. Interval is based on the time elapsed. So think interval time, the time period that has elapsed. Then we have fixed, is that the reinforcement always takes place after a fixed time or number of responses. So fixed means the reinforcement always takes place. Variable is an average number of responses or times may be used when a reward occurs after an unpredictable amount of responses. So fixed just means it's going to always take place. Variable means it's not going to always take place, so you measure it based off the average number of responses. So some examples we have fixed ratio is giving a child an M&M for each 5 math problems she completes. So fixed means it's going to happen every fixed means that the reinforcement always takes place, and the ratio means that it's going to always take place based on a number of responses. So fixed ratio is giving a child an M&M for each 5 math problems she completes. So the fixed part means it's going to always take place, and the ratio means that it will always take place based on the number of responses. Then we have fixed interval, which is the way that most agency counselors are paid. So fixed means that it's going to always take place, and that interval means it's going to take place after a number of oops. Fixed means that it's going to sorry. Fixed means fixed interval. The fixed part means that it's going to always take place, and interval means it's going to be based on a time interval or time lapse. So one time you'll get paid one time per month, although the amount of work may vary from month to month. So say you get paid one time a month, that means it's fixed because you're going to always get paid, but it's a fixed interval because it's based off a certain amount of time, 30 days. So a fixed interval would be like if you got paid after every 7 sessions. That would be a fixed ratio because it's continuous, is always, but after a number of responses. Versus fixed interval is going to always happen, but after a certain time period has elapsed. So then we have variable ratio. So variable means it'll be after an average. And then ratio means that it'll be a number of responses. So variable ratio, it will happen on an average, based on the average number of responses. So the example is a counselor who decides his consultancy fee job by job instead of setting a standard rate. So that means it's not fixed because it's not guaranteed, but it will happen based off a number, a set, average amount of responses. So it says like, hey, I'm going to come here. Um, uh, um, I'm going to come here throughout the month, and then I can't promise you it'll be 5 times a month. It'll just be as needed. So I might come 4 times this month. I might come 3 times the next month. It's just an average number of responses and ratio based off the number of responses, average number of responses. So the most effective to least effective is VR. The most effective to least effective in counseling is VR, VI, FR, FI. So just think VR, virtual reality, and then so it'll be VR, VI, FR, FI. So the most effective is VR. So we have the Premack principle is when an efficient reinforcer is an efficient reinforce is what the client likes to do. Therefore, a low probability behavior is reinforced by high probability behavior. So the Premack principle stated that an efficient reinforcer is what the client likes to do. So Premack principle says that an efficient reinforcer is going to be what the client likes to do. So if the client likes to go to the park, that would be a efficient reinforcer. Therefore, a low probability behavior, like sweeping the floor, is reinforced by a high probability behavior, something they would like to do. So any high probability behavior can be used as a reinforcer for any low probability behavior. This is sometimes called Grandma's Law, which is, i.e., if you eat your vegetables, you get dessert. So the low probability behavior would be the vegetables, the high probability behavior is the dessert. So pre-Mac principle, think grandma's law. If you eat your vegetables, you get dessert. We have a memory box. We have Edward Thorndike. He has the law of effect, aka trial and error. Also, we talked about Edward Thorndike a little bit under operant condition, because that's kind of where it came from. Is when a behavior is results in satisfaction, you're more likely to do that behavior again, and if it results in unsatisfaction or insatisfaction, then you're not as likely to do it again. So this is also known as trial and error. You do it to see if you like it, or if you don't. Practice does not ensure effective learning. The practice must yield a reward. So the practice itself isn't what is going to create effective learning. The practice must yield a reward. And that was Edward Thorndike. Then we have just a reminder, Joseph Walpay, who is a behaviorist, systematic desensitization learning. Then we have Ivan Pavlov, classical conditioning. Um, Classical conditioning also refers to association learning. And then the last of what we have on here is Neil Miller and Ali Ben Benuazazi. Yeah, Ali Benuazazi, Azizi, Benuazizi. Neil Miller and Ali Benuazizi conducted the first studies that demonstrated that animals could indeed be conditioned to control autonomic processes. By utilizing rewards, rats could be trained to alter heart rate and intestinal contractions. Prior to this experiment, it was thought that automatic or autonomic bodily processes, such as heart rate, intestinal contractions, or blood pressure, could not be controlled. So, Neil Miller and Ali B conducted the first studies that demonstrated that animals could indeed be conditioned to control autonomic processes. And that would be all for our part 5.